Mr Speaker, just to put on the record...
Order, there's a point of order being heard.
Yeah, sorry, just to put on the record the fact that Mr Quinn has accepted my donation to his campaign down south on the basis he will be my candidate.
That will do.
Thank you very much.
Look, while we can have a bit of a laugh at this time of the proceedings with not much time to go, that's really interrupting things. So I call... Stuart Nash.
Easy to have a bit of a laugh, but it's not really easy to have a little bit of a laugh if you've had a look at this tax package and seen it delivers absolutely nothing. And it was quite interesting, Mr Speaker, because that last man said that, do you want to return to the sort of government you had? Well, I'll tell you what, the sort of government we had was a Minister of Finance who completely eradicated government debt. It was a leader who did not stand in front of a camera and say, I will not increase GST. And then he did it. And then he did it. What do you call that? That's the sort of leader we have in the Labour Party, a leader who would not stand in front of the camera and say, I will not borrow for tax cuts. And what did their leader do? He broke the promise. This is a budget of broken promises, and this is a bill of broken promises. It's a disgrace, I can tell you that. And we had Mr Gilmore stand up before and say, it's all okay, don't worry about it. Page 63 says, the stats say it's all going to be okay. Well, I can tell you what, on that same document, on page 65, the Treasury say pre-tax wages will not respond fully to the price rises caused by GST. That is what Treasury says. That is what Treasury says. And as for Ms Rahui Katane, I can't believe that she stood up and she said, well, we don't think this bill goes far enough. Well, I'll tell you what, or we're not satisfied with this bill. Philip, could you grab me a drink, please? We are not satisfied with this bill. Well, I can tell you, Mr Speaker, we are not satisfied with this bill either. So I'll tell you what we do when we're not satisfied with a bill, we vote against it. That's what we do. So how dare that member over there stand up and say that she's not satisfied with the bill and then she votes for it?
That's right.
What's that called?
Well, you can't say what it's called.
No, it's not.
You do.
But worse still, Mr Speaker, that member stood up and she outlined why, thank you, Philip, she outlined why she was not satisfied with this bill, because it increases GST. There are 72% of people in that member's electorate who are earning under $40,000. 72% of people in that member's electorate who are going to be worse off.
And what's she doing about it?
And what's she doing about it? Well, I'll tell you what she's doing about it. She's not voting against it. She's not voting against it. She is supporting this bill. And then she has the nerve to stand up and talk about her private member's bill, which she says is going to take GST off healthy food, which of course defines healthy food as fish and chips and Kentucky Fried Chicken. But she says she wants to take GST off healthy food as she votes for the bill. I just think that's a travesty, and I think the 72% of people in her electorate that earn under $40,000 will think exactly the same thing.
A weekend warrior. A weekend warrior.
The last National Speaker was right. This does send a message to the people of New Zealand. The message it sends is that you cannot trust that government, Mr Speaker, because their leader stood up, and he promised us that he would not do what he has done in this budget. This really isn't an aspirational bill at all for all of New Zealand. I can't see how it drives growth, because the economic theory behind this is outdated. And that was highlighted by, I think, Mr Quinn, Tau Henare, who stood up and said, if you give money to the wealthy, they'll spend it. Well, those are the economics of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. That's the economics of last century, and it does not stack up in this day and age. It's been proved not to stack up in this day and age. I'll tell you what the wealthy will do with this tax cut. I'll tell you what they'll do. They'll either retire debt or they'll save it. That is what economic theory has now proved. But I'll tell you what this bill does do. There's one thing this bill does do. It delivers tax cuts for the very wealthy. Paul Reynolds, who is head of that company called Telecom, and we all know what Telecom has done recently, what a fantastic service it's provided. Paul Reynolds has a base salary of $1.7 million. He is going to get around $1.7 million. He's going to get around about $1,600 a week in the hand. That's around about $88,000 extra in his back pocket every single year. There are very few Kiwis who earn that. And that's going to be his tax cut. But I'll tell you what, Mr. Speaker, I will tell that member over there that if the 73% of people in her electorate that are on the median wage will get about $5 a week. About $5 a week. And I can tell you what also will happen. The president of the New Zealand Property Investors Association has now come out and said the Treasury figures about rent going up about 1.5% are wrong. He has said, this is the man that represents the people that own the investment properties, that rent them out to the people that can't afford to buy. He has said that rents are going to go up between about 4.5% and 6.5%. And then he said, oh, there might be an inflationary thing thrown in there as well. Well, Merry Christmas to the people of New Zealand. This is not a tax cut that delivers anything. This is a tax cut that delivers something to the very wealthy and nothing to the vast majority. This is a disgrace. The gap between Australian and New Zealand workers could not be more stark. Yes, Australia did lower the company tax rate. But do you know why they lowered that company tax rate? I will tell those members. They lowered that company tax rate because what they did is they gave back to the workers. What the Australian government said, they gave back 33%. They said we are going to increase the savings of Australian workers. That is why they gave a tax cut to the Australian companies. What has this government done? They've said tax cuts to New Zealand companies, but nothing for the workers. Nothing for the workers. Tax cuts for the wealthy, nothing for the poor. That is not the way forward. That is not the way forward. It brings me back once again to Mr. Key's comment about being jealous of tax cuts in this bill. It shows his true colours, because I'll tell you what this does. What this shows is Mr. Key judges people by the back pocket, by how much they earn, not the sort of person they are. There are many people in our communities that contribute significantly but do not earn as much as Mr. Key, or a law partner, or an investment banker, or a top scientist, but it doesn't mean that they don't contribute. We all know that. There are people in our community who give their time freely to help others less fortunate. In fact, sometimes the opposite can be true. It is often the less well-off in our community who contribute mostly to the safety and the well-being of our fellow citizens, often volunteering. And what sort of message do they get from this tax bill? The PM's statement around envy did nothing to make them feel valued. In fact, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. What they will contribute in toil, to hard work, to give their hours freely for the benefit of the whole community. Don't treat them like they are worth less than someone who earns $500,000, because they are not, and they deserve better. My beautiful daughter is taught by a teacher earning under $70,000. My wonderful son is in a fantastic daycare centre, which has just been gutted, that industry, taught by amazing staff, looked after by amazing staff who earn under $70,000. A lot of our police patrol our streets, keep us safe. They earn under $70,000. The nurses who fix us up when we fall over, the vast majority of them earn under $70,000. The people that make our communities tick are the people who receive nothing in this bill we are now debating. They are just as valuable, and in fact, I would argue, often more valuable than a merchant banker who makes millions betting on our exchange rate, but creating nothing and caring for no one. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget and this is a bill that does not deliver for New Zealand. This government came in on the promise of a step change. That has not occurred. Paul Williams, Paul Reynolds, one of our wealthiest, is getting $1,600 a week. The people, $1,600 a week in the hand. That's how much he's getting. And someone on the median wage in that member's electorate is getting $5 a week. Is getting $5 a week. How is that aspirational? And on top of that, the rent is going to increase. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that widens that gap between those very few who have the most in our society and the vast majority who are struggling and will struggle with increases in GST, increases in power, increases in everything they buy for and increases in rent.
This time next year.
Mr Speaker,